Could Todo get his curse technique back with a binding vow? Let's talk about it. All right, this question comes to us from Ildi. So y'all that have been following the Ildi saga, we found him. We got the question. Let's get into it. He says, we've seen binding vows change the requirements of a curse technique before, such as adding extra steps or restrictions. Do we think that Todo could do something like this to get his Boogie Woogie back? He says his thoughts on the conditions would be he's unable to swap himself, but is instead able to swap other people and objects by striking his body, and maybe if he uses another person's hand to clap, he can swap himself. But what are your thoughts? All right, so this is really interesting, but just first of all, I want to say that this video is only going to focus on this binding vow aspect. So for anybody that wants to know, like, why can't Todo just have his hand healed and then he can clap again? These are things I've talked about in the past, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'll link you down to a video in the pinned comments where you can see that explanation. But again, for this, we're only going to focus on the binding vow. And just a really quick recap of why Todo can't use Boogie Woogie anymore. It's because, one, he chopped off one of his own hands, right? But on top of that, his other hand, his good hand, has also been rendered inert in terms of Boogie Woogie because Mahito used idle transfiguration on it. This clap right here, Mahito was using idle transfiguration and he ruined Todo's other palm. So as far as Todo is concerned, he doesn't have any good hands for his curse technique anymore, and he calls it dead. So could a binding vow grant him access to this Boogie Woogie once more? So I think this is possible, but just not probable. And here's why. Because we've seen binding vows in this series do a number of crazy things, right? And even like Ildi mentioned, we've seen binding vows that allow characters to bypass hand sign requirements or bypass chanting requirements. So couldn't Todo make a binding vow to bypass the clapping requirement? And I do think, again, it's possible, but not probable because you can't really equate Todo's clap to a hand sign requirement, because hand signs in most cases, not all, but most cases, are used to amplify an existing technique in some way, right? Todo's clapping is not amplifying his Boogie Woogie. It's an integral part of it. So the fact that he doesn't have that right now means he basically doesn't have Boogie Woogie right now. Like the man says, my technique is dead. So if Todo makes some sort of binding vow, the thing he's giving up can't have anything to do with Boogie Woogie. So for example, he wouldn't be able to say, I'll no longer swap myself if I don't have to clap my hands, because he already can't swap himself because he can't do the swap, period. An analogy would be like, we know how Inumaki lost his arm in Shibuya, right? So Inumaki can't go out there and make a binding vow that says, in exchange for my arm I no longer have, I want to be able to talk normally. He couldn't do that because he doesn't have that arm to give up. So Todo cannot give up anything related to his curse technique because he doesn't have access to it right now. So, and again, I'm not saying this would work, but hypothetically, Todo would have to be like, I'll give up my other arm. So I will no longer have any arms if I can now clap with my feet to activate my technique. Maybe something like that would work. I mean, come on. Could you imagine Todo just posted up like this, clapping his feet, supporting from the back lines? I'm here for it. Y'all know I love Todo, and I want nothing more than for him to gloriously re-enter the story with his Boogie Woogie. So this might be one of the more likely ways that could happen. And I don't mean the feet thing, I just mean in general with some sort of binding vow, because RCT isn't going to give him his hands back, and even if we could heal his soul fully, that might not work either, because Mahito's idle transfiguration changes the shape of your soul. So I don't know that we can equate that to damage. So it may not be possible to heal, even if you could heal it, if that makes sense. So binding vow may be a viable option, but we'll have to wait and see. But Ildi, thank you so much for the interesting question, and I will see you guys in the next one.